Lise Doucette, who's there for us. Lise.
Yes, and indeed, Ukraine, as you mentioned, continues to dominate this year's Munich Security Conference for a second day. It's been one of the main issues on the panels and also in the corridors. But there's also been another issue on the agenda, and that is the ceasefire in Gaza, which is holding, and the future of the coastal enclave, and of course the future for the Palestinian people in Gaza. We're joined here by the Commissioner General of UNRWA, which is the main UN agency working in Palestinian areas. Philippe Lazzarini, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. There's been a lot of concern as to whether or not this ceasefire will hold. What's your observation today? Is it shaky?
Well, we were questioning a few days ago if the ceasefire will hold until today. We're questioning if yes or not hostages will be released, and it has been a real relief to see that 3 hostages again have been released, and more than 300 detainees, 300 Palestinian detainees. So it's still a very fragile ceasefire, but it has shown that it has held until now since January 19. I think it's very important now that discussions are taking place for the second phase and the third phase of this ceasefire.
And of course, this phase of the ceasefire is called the humanitarian phase, and that includes more aid getting into Gaza, and more aid is getting in. What is your overall assessment now about the humanitarian situation in Gaza?
It is true that there is much more aid going into Gaza. In fact, it has increased by tenfold. Before the ceasefire, we had an average of about 50 trucks. Now it's 500-600 trucks. Today we report 800 trucks. The main impact has been that the deepening of the hunger has been reversed, so we have avoided a situation of a famine. People have been able to move around. It has also provided a respite. The children are back in the street. But Gazans are also discovering a completely destroyed neighborhood. They went back to their home and could not believe the level of devastation they have found.
Your organization is described by the United Nations, by many of your donors, as the backbone of the humanitarian operations in Gaza, but you have been declared illegal by the Israeli parliament. The Israeli officials cannot deal with UNRWA anymore. How much of an obstacle is that for you to continue operating?
So basically there are 2 laws. One law prevents the presence of UNRWA and its activity in the sovereign territory of Israel, and we know Israel considers East Jerusalem as part of its territory, so there is a first impact here, and there is a second law preventing any contact between Israeli official and UNRWA official. So this no-contact policy, as a first impact, has prevented international staff to stay in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, but our Palestinian workforce, the one providing education in our schools, the one providing health services across the West Bank and across Gaza, continue to work. And since the beginning of the ceasefire, we have also in Gaza reached out 1.5 million people when it comes to food distribution, and we continue to provide an average of 17 to 20,000 health consultation a day. And these activities continue. The law does not prevent, in the West Bank and in Gaza, our Palestinian staff to deliver these services.
But if it's illegal for Israeli officials to interact with UNRWA now, how do you manage when Israel plays such a key role?
This is a real issue. It makes our environment much more complicated, especially in a situation of occupation. Before, our international staff interceded whenever there was a security incident, which is today not really possible, which exposed even more our national staff, both in the West Bank, but also in Gaza.
Is there any way to redress this? Of course, Israel accuses you of being too linked to Hamas. That was behind this Israeli law in the Knesset. You continue to say that you investigate whenever there are charges. Is this the end of the story, or can this be resolved?
So, listen, I was in Munich. Here I have discussed with a number of member states about the future of the agency. And basically I have said we have a choice. Either we let the agency implode. But if we implode, what does it mean? More suffering for the Palestinian refugees. There is already a lot of despair. If you bring even more despair, this is a fertile environment for more extremism in the future. Or we decide that the agency is an asset for the Palestinian refugees and the international community. We be part of a genuine political process leading to the building up and the empowering of future Palestinian institutions. And so at the end, UNRWA will be able to hand over its activities.
Very briefly, you feel you're getting support?
I feel that there is a lot of understanding and support, mainly in the Arab world, but also here in Europe.
And that support means continued funding for UNRWA?
I wouldn't go as far. Our situation is extremely precarious. We are in a kind of existential moment for the agencies, but we will leave absolutely no stone unturned until we succeed.
Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, thank you very much for joining us here in Munich, here as the second day of the Munich Security Conference slowly draws to a close. There's still more discussions tomorrow, and in fact, the EU's Foreign Policy Chief, Kaja Kallas, has called for a meeting of all the European leaders here to discuss some of the conclusions of and reflections after all of the, not just the statements you've heard from the main stage, but also, of course, the discussions in the corridors. We're going to continue to bring you special coverage from Munich, but for now, that's all from us on BBC News.
Hello there. For many parts of Europe, it's going to be dry over the coming few days. It is, however, going to be quite cold as well. Now, there is still an area of low pressure across the Mediterranean. It's bringing some wet and windy weather across parts of